You're looking good, and it feels good to be with you today. Hello, I'm Kendall Bryan Hunter, author of the book Consider My Servant Job, and this is News with the Eyes of Faith, where I talk about news from the perspective of Christ and from the perspective of the doctrine of Jesus Christ. Well, top of the news item is Sister Emily Bell Freeman, President Freeman, announced the release of a new History of the Young Women's Organization. That's absolutely great. It's been about 10 years in the making, and read it. There's people talking about how the church doesn't talk about the woman's point of view, but they've had stuff come out recently. Relief Society, the first 50 years, maybe it was 100 years. I read the book, and then the At the Pulpit, which is billed as a journal of discourses for women. We're filling in a lot of the gaps. Daughters in My Kingdom. Let's see. More carnal secular news. Trump bought a Tesla. Now, as you know, that Elon Musk is taking a personal hit by working with Donald Trump. Trump's a bit of a lightning rod, even before becoming president. And there's been a hit in some of the sales of Tesla, plus the vandalism that's been going on. It's a form of domestic terrorism. Let's call these accusations of Nazism forms of domestic terrorism. But Trump's a persuasion master. Having him buying a Tesla, of course colored red like the hats, that's a good persuasion technique. One report I heard is that the sales of Tesla kicked up a bit. About Donald Trump's persuasion techniques, I recommend reading a book called Win Bigly by Scott Adams, the cartoonist of Dilbert, where he talks about persuasion techniques. Persuasion is something you really need to add to your skill set. Applying for a job, that's persuasion. So studying how persuasion works is going to help you in other areas. Teaching a lesson, getting your kids to mind, that's all persuasion, and study how it works. So Trump buying the Tesla, the red Tesla, think about the garbage truck, or have you forgotten about that already? Vivek Ramaswamy and the Rebel Scum t-shirts. Look those up if you haven't heard about those. Persuasion is about emotional perceptions and not about reality, especially if you're going to law school. There's a difference between making a legal argument and then persuading the jury. Those are two different tasks. You approach things differently. One's logical, one's emotional. So we have what I call the circular news. Some of the news gets repetitive. Doge cutbacks in government. A court blocks it. The higher court reverses itself, but yeah, it's repetitive news. So interesting thing I heard about on the Salem Radio Networks is the Kansas State House. There's a satanic group going to pray over there, and this is from Kansas State House. Join us at the Topeka Capitol building in Kansas as we dedicate the grounds and our legislature to the glory of Satan. The event's details read. We'll be performing rites to the Black Mass and indulging in sacrilegious blaspheme. God will fall and Kansas will be embraced by the black flame of Lucifer. I hope you're mature enough to process this, and not to brush this off because you just don't want to process something really scary. Book of Mormon, Mormon 1:19. And it came to pass that there were sorceries and witchcrafts and magics, and the power of the evil one was wrought upon all the face of the land, even at the fulfilling of all the words of Abinadi and also Samuel the Lamanite. Are you processing that, or are you in denial? Handbook 38.6.12, The Occult. That which is of God is light. Doctrine and Covenants, section 50, verse 24. The occult focuses on darkness and leads to deception. It destroys faith in Christ. The occult includes Satan worship. It also includes mystical activities that are not in harmony with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Such activities include, but are not limited to, fortune-telling, curses, and healing practices that are imitations of the priesthood power. That's energy healing. Family member who's involved with that. Church members should not engage in any form of Satan worship or practice in any way with the occult. They should not focus on such darkness in conversations or in church meetings. Yeah, here's a story from my mission. So we had four of us, district leader, his companion, me and my companion. We're all living in the same house. It's a city called Beja, Beja, Portugal. We lived across the street from a castle, so it was a memorable city. So one day we got up, and my companion and the district leader were sitting there just kind of reading stuff in the Bible. So I just looked at the district leader's junior companion. I said, well, you want to go do missionary work? And so we went out, and just left and did missionary work. And then we came back for lunch. And what was kind of funny, we came back and I can't remember. Oh, maybe this may have been two separate times at the but what happened is we're coming back. Everyone was running out of the apartment into the street, and I kind of curious what was going on. And the question was asked, like, well, why'd you with your companions? Like, well, you two are you're my district leader. You're goofing off. I'm here to do missionary work, and it's obscene we're having this conversation. But what happened is my district leader and then my junior companion were studying up on something diabolic. And they're reading it, and then what happened is in the apartment, the lights flickered. And the light flickered, so they got up and just bolted out of the apartment. And no, I didn't include that in my mission homecoming. And I actually never reported to the High Council. I couldn't make the schedule work. However, I did do a report to the one of the branches in St. Petersburg, Russia. So I'm counting that as my report to the High Council. So that was kind of interesting. After the end of my mission, my parents came up and picked me up and traveled around Europe as a missionary. I don't recommend doing it. You can't do anything because you're still set apart. So you're bound by the mission rules, and you get this mystical association where you have to wear the name tag. Well, another point in the news, sorry for that jerk, but jerk in the flow, government shutdown was averted. This is why you do your taxes early. The continuing revelations or resolutions are part of the symptoms of a bigger problem with budgeting. We're just not being serious with our budgets. I remember a social studies class with Victoria Bradford, middle school. This was, I think, probably around 1984, maybe 83, 84, and we were discussing this in the it wasn't social studies or American history class. So discussing about the budget. How this is imploding. This is back in 1984. Even earlier, 1968, President Ezra Taft Benson talked about in his conference talks of the proper role of government. Neil A. Maxwell said this: patriotism which sees beyond the years leaves legacies to rising generations instead of debt. It leaves clean turf, not the debris of a selfish society. That was in his Freedom Festival talk from 1993. For some reason, you just can't find the text of it. I think for a bit I found it, but then it was pulled. They just have the audio of it. So if you can find it, play the audio of it, Neil A. Maxwell's talk. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. More in the news, trans Americans turning to guns for protection, to stories from Washington Post, MSN. The Trans Army Facebook page recruits veterans, police officers to join, quote, rebellion, stockpile weapons, prepare for what's coming. Yeah, that's advocating of violence. Church, after January 6th, the church released the statement on political violence. I 100% support that. And ballot box, not bombs. But are we getting comfortable with double standards of violence? You remember the congressional assassination came to the baseball game, or it was congressional softball games where the Republicans were shot at? How many Democrat presidents have been assassinated versus Republicans as a matter of historical history? Look that up. If you're benefiting from a double standard, are you keeping quiet about it? That's the Jim Crow principle. You know, if you're benefiting from Jim Crow, are you keeping quiet about it? Are you speaking out against the injustice? What was your reaction to the assassination attempt on President Trump, especially if you're from the party of John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy? And you find it surprising that Robert F. Kennedy's son is part of the Trump administration? Yeah, beware the double standards. Be careful about this violence. Economics. This is going to be the largest slice of steak in this podcast. Last week I mentioned I had a friend laid off due to Doge cuts. There's cuts in the post office. That means people will be unemployed, your postal workers. But some of these are just necessary cutbacks. As I mentioned earlier, Elder Neil A. Maxwell back in 1993 gave this talk. It goes by two names about proper patriotism. It also goes by the name God Mend Thy Every Flaw. And it was for the Freedom Festival in Provo. So you can get it off the BYU Speeches page. And it's interesting because the text of his talk was the song America the Beautiful. So we're all familiar with the lyrics of it and how he get points about, thine alabaster cities gleams, but they're smeared with vandalism. But he begins talking about the national debt, about how that's the time bomb that's going to blow up, and that's exactly what Doge is doing. It's tackling the national debt because we're on a course, as we've been talking about my entire life. General authorities, President Benson and Elder Maxwell talked about it. It's only getting worse, and we're just honestly dealing with the problem. There's also been, sorry, I ate 2 oranges before starting, and I'm still a little coffee. Not drinking coffee, but I'm coughing. Tariffs in the stock market's gone crazy. My 401k and portfolio have definitely taken a hit. Part of this is just normal economic cycles. Part of it has to do with the uncertainty about the tariffs, how they're being implemented or held off. Is this just a negotiating tactic, or is this something permanent? Always remember, markets adjust. Markets adjust. Markets adjust. Just a little bit. I'm age 54. I'm old enough to remember double-digit inflation from the 1970s, stagflation, the gas lines in the 1970s. I lived through that. 1980s boom because of the tax cuts, the dot-com boom of the 1990s. I lived through the 9/11 recession, had hours cut back from work, the 2008 Great Recession, more hours cut back, the COVID-19 recession. I'm going to talk about something. I lived through all of that, and you'll survive. And I'm going to talk about the principles of survival, how to survive economic uncertainty right now. Because this is a news thing, but you're getting the repetitive news, and this is why I don't do a daily show. So like a Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity is sometimes the news just gets in a cycle, and you're just filling up time, and it gets a little bit boring. But I can talk about these principles, and I was able to pay off my student loans. I was able to pay off out-of-pocket a hernia operation. I was able to pay out-of-pocket a toe amputation, and I was able to loan my brother $1,000 so he could buy a house. And I'm going to talk about how I did that. And what got me through was just financial common sense and self-control. Now, there's a talk by a general authority called Earthly Debts, Heavenly Debts. Now, first one he gave, this is just a normal general authority talk on personal finance, but I think it's a really good one from a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, Joseph B. Wirthlin. So I put a link to it. It's from April 2004. Earthly Debts, Heavenly Debts, where he talks about personal finance. He also addresses the issue. There's a fallacy known as a category mistake, and people say, well, Jesus Christ paid our debts, forgive us our debts. We should forgive the debts of student loans. Now, that's a logical error known as a category mistake, because the debt of sin is something that we cannot pay back. But consumer debt, student loan debt, you can pay that back. Like I said, I did it. I paid back every last dollar, every red cent, every thin dime of that loan. And I'm going to talk about the principles. And here's the principles. First, and this is from the Elder Joseph B. Wirthlin's talk, and this is how you do it. First, you pay your tithing. Secondly, you spend less than you earn. Third, you learn to save. Fourth, you honor your financial obligations. You made a promise to pay back those student loans. You made a promise to pay back that credit card. You need to keep your word. You need to keep your promise. Fifth, teach your children to follow your example too. They have this other talk by Elder Robert D. Hales. This is around the 2008 problem. In this talk, he talked about 2 things his wife told him, and this is what Sister Hales said. When they'd want something, he'd say, we can't afford it, and 2, we don't need it. And that's how you get yourself under control. When you go on eBay and you see that box of glow-in-the-dark Frisbees, we can't afford it, we don't need it. If you're planning your company's summer party and the company's paying for it, well then, your company can afford it, but you don't need a box of glow-in-the-dark Frisbees or Captain Kirk bobbleheads. So those are the principles. You get on a budget, get out of debt, and don't do drugs, as I put it. Recommend here. I'll just keep doing this. Here's this book by Richard Paul Evans, The Christmas Box Guy, the 5 lessons a millionaire taught me about life and wealth. Lesson 1 is decide to be wealthy. Another way to think about that is to do a reframe or a affirmation this way. I will be a celestial steward of Christ's money. You get your pay stub and look at it. I will be a celestial steward of Christ's money. Say that 5 times with your with your paycheck, or 15 times, or whatever works for you, and you'll change your spending habits and your spending behavior. That's how you get out of debt. That's how you keep your promises. Recommend The Richest Man in Babylon. Make sure you're saving at least 10% of your paycheck. What you pay in tithing should go into your savings account. Dave Ramsey. Here's the baby steps. $1,000 emergency fund. Pay off all debt with the debt snowball. And you can see YouTube videos that explain how debt snowball works. You can get help. People want it for free. Will help you out. 3 to 6 months expenses in a savings account. That's in case you lose your job. You can cover expenses for 6 months. What would that be like? How's that going to feel? Invest in step 4 is invest 15% of your income in Roth IRAs and pre-tax retirement plans. That's building for the future. 5, college funding. I'm not married. I don't have kids, so I skip that step. I don't own a home. Skip that step. Build wealth and give. I'm at step 7. And can I tell you something? Once you get out of debt, getting out of debt, that's the self-discipline process. That's the baptism of fire, the crucible where that's the cocoon where you turn into something incredible, because you get your spending under control and more importantly, get your appetites under control, and you get yourself organized with a written budget. I use a spreadsheet. There's apps out there, but getting out of debt, paying off your debt, and honoring your commitments and keeping your promises is absolutely crucial. Become a better person once you're done with that. So, question about investing in the stock market with step 7. That's a little bit tricky. It's outside of my area of expertise. My degree's in history. My minor's in political science. That's why I do a news thing. But this is what works for me: is you have $1,000 in your savings fund where it's really liquid. You can get to it that's when you have a car problem. You hit a hiccup. You get a surprise medical bill. The doctor says, hey, I need to run a few more tests. That's what your $1,000 emergency fund is. A friend of mine at work said he had a credit card that was his emergency fund backup. Well, he's paying fees and he's paying interest. Your emergency fund, you're collecting interest. You got it? You pay off your debt. It's called commutative justice. You made a promise and you keep that promise. I put my 3 to 6 months in a money market account. Now, money market accounts is a high interest savings account, but there's some restrictions on it. So you can only take it out like 6. The bank I use says 6. I think like 6 withdrawals per year or something like that. But it's a higher interest and it just sits in there. So if you don't have any employment problems, you're just racking in money. So starting safe, you get your emergency fund in place. You pay off your debts. Back in the Boy Scouts, we learned about double E bonds. That's sort of how a grandma approaches things, but that's a safe investment. So if you have a low risk tolerance, or your wife really catastrophizes, that's where you start out. So, okay, here's the government bonds. You leave it in there for a couple of decades, then it'll double after 30 years. And so the sooner you start it, the sooner the money doubles. But that's after you pay off your loans. Then you have another one called a certificate of deposit, and that's just a savings bond with a bank rather than the government. It's high interest. You just leave it in there for a set amount of time. There are penalties for early withdrawal, and the money just magically appears in there if you don't touch it. It's just amazing. Once you flip over, you start doing this. Once you start collecting interest rather than paying interest. So the stock market, you look for rule makers versus rule breakers. That's from Motley Fool. So you have common sense stocks like Ford, Chevron, Campbell's Soup, General Mills, Kellogg's, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nike, Disney. What's on the Dow Jones Industrial Average companies? You start with those first. Stuff you're familiar with, stuff that you have a relationship with. Then you go for the rule breakers. That's the AI stuff, the electronic vehicles. With this one, you think future. Who's building the future? Well, Tesla. They're building electric vehicles. They're building robots. You have questions about AI chips with NVIDIA. That's outside of my area of expertise, so I'm not going to comment on it. Crypto. See, with stocks is that you don't collect interest, but you have what's called the a realized gain. Is when you sell the stock, you invested a certain money, the stock goes up, you sell it, and that's called the realized gain. But you also get dividends. And I've been getting a lot of dividends here. So I get in my email, so this company's paying dividends. Once again, it's just you're putting money in these companies that you trust in. You know, you'll eat Campbell's Soup, and Kellogg's and General Mills. You'll eat Lucky Charms, and then they're paying you money. So you get in there, and once again, after you've developed the character where you're not on a spending frenzy, the money just rolls in. Find a coach, find a mentor, and don't rely upon the word crackpot. And, there's plenty of books out there. There's plenty of podcasts. These books that I've recommend, that's a good place to start. So that will get your finances under control. Uncertainty that happens, stuff comes up. And this keeps you on top of it. It's just having this nest egg in there, and it's just keeps laying golden eggs as you collect interest instead of paying interest, and you stop buying glow-in-the-dark Frisbees. So I'd like to talk a little bit about entertainment and entertainment conservatives. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is I discussed this model about persuasion, philosophic engagement. You have the high level, which is philosophical, and that's the rarefied discussion. That's Aristotle, Plato. You have the popular level, which has two prongs to it. You have the fiction and the nonfiction. So nonfiction would be stuff like the TV show Cosmos, Popular Mechanics, Popular Science. I think those magazines aren't here. These special time magazines about the universe or whatever. That's popular stuff. And you have the fiction stuff, and that's what you see in the movies and the radio. Certain ideas are presented. Ethical choices the character makes. That you're getting persuaded, you're getting taught through watching movies about how reality functions. And you have the personal one, which is a little bit, I'm more of a popular and a personal one. Is a personal one, that's the one-on-one conversations at work, the break room conversations you have with people, and that's how you persuade them and just process truth and reality. So there's always been this people who are ideological. They're social liberals, social conservatives. That'd be what the Democrats, fiscal conservatives, and social conservatives would tend to be the Republicans. But that's starting to change over time. There's a little bit of homogenizing. So you get this interesting person who's a social liberal, or the live and let live, and they're not doctrinary. They're not the religious fanatics, the Bible thumpers. These fundamentalist boogeymen. But what you're seeing right now is the entertainment conservatives. And it has to do with Disney's acquiring Star Wars and then the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Simpsons has always been a social liberal, fiscal conservative. But what's happening is the entertainment liberals, the institutions are going really left. The girl boss. You're seeing this in the movies where you're just watching these movies. It's all about glamorizing women at the expense of men, where they'll take the legacy male character, they become a deadbeat dad, Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Indiana Jones, and then they replace it with a svelte brunette British woman. Other things with some of these TV shows with what's the America with in the Doctor Strange movie, where you see this is a Doctor Strange movie that gets hijacked by this other character, Captain America. That's another thing is race swapping characters. Captain America: Brave New World, but it's really a follow up to Hulk, and so it gets a little bit confusing. But some of the ideas that are with the messaging, they see it with Doctor Who as LGBTQ issues, and it's interesting. I'm always with a free market person. If they want to go that way, okay, go ahead and go that way, but just don't coerce me. And if I don't like it, I won't go see it. But you see these people that are entertainment conservatives. You want to call them. At least I used not to think that. You have neurotic critical drinker Jesse Grant, Mahler, Overlord DVD. Overlord DVD is he started with criticizing Star Trek Discovery, where they're just doing stuff. You're focusing on social messaging rather than storytelling, and it sort of indirectly has to do with the political left ideology. And I thought that they weren't MAGA wearers, and I saw this one off of Nerdrotic. It was Nerdrotic Daily Podcast, and he's there and he's wearing a red Trump hat, but it said "Make Comics Great Again." Because I could tell he is critical of the politicizing, ideologizing the entertainment, and you're just getting really bad stories, getting the message out rather than telling a good story, something powerful. And then he's there with that hat on. I thought, okay, there's a little bit of a crossover here. And so I don't know what their personal political beliefs, but this is the argument against the decline in in movie going is just putting messaging ahead of storytelling, and yet there's a way to do it in a way that works. So it's just not working right now. There's a little bit of incoherence here. They social liberal, fiscal conservative, because they have what's called this moral law, and you read about it in Bennett's The Book of Virtues. C.S. Lewis talks about it in his book, The Abolition of Man. It's what we call the light of Christ. Another way to think of it is a broad, common, traditional morality that across cultures, you read Hammurabi's Code, Egyptian ethics, the Bible, Greek ethics, Aristotle. There's a doctrinaire approach to things, but there's sort of a broad consensus about what traditional morality is, broad, common, traditional morality. So they have it in finances. They don't want it in social activities, but they also want it in entertainment. So you see there's a little bit of a tension there. Well, why don't you want this? Because it's all part of one system. So it is a contradictory way to live. It's mostly people giving into differing about personal passions. Critical drinkers about drinking and glamorizing it. So it's not a total conversion, but it is a foothold. These are people we can work with. Say, yeah, this messaging we're getting, it's being very heavy-handed, and it's screwing up the entertainments. We're just tuning out, and it's interesting because some of them were talking about Disney's doing good stuff, Skeleton Crew, but people aren't watching it. And the same thing with the recent Daredevil one. Now, Daredevil looks too violent for me, so I won't watch it, although I did like the Ben Affleck theatrical version of it. But people are watching these, not watching. We get the hardcore fans watching it, but it's not reaching out. And it's like with me, this is just a burnout. I'm just not interested in watching I've been watching the same pattern going on where the force is female and you're excluding me as a male. I noticed that with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, 7, 8, and 9, and then they did Rogue One about a female character. So I sort of like the Han Solo one, but just doesn't appeal to me. The same thing with Wakanda Forever. I thought it was absolutely Shakespearean, but didn't have anything for black men. Black men are at risk. Men aren't attending higher education anymore. They're being displaced by women, and even President Hinckley talked about that. But it's part of a larger system, an anti-male system. So pay attention. Reach out to the friends who are entertainment conservatives. Say, yeah, I agree with you. This messaging, you allow people to do what they want to do. But yeah, this is just screwing up our entertainment. Here's something else I talked about. We're at 27 minutes, and it's interesting. I saw this article by Kai Swanson, things that happen in every MCU movie, and 14 things that happen in every MCU movie. And here's 3 of them, or 4 of them. The illusion of moral complexity. This scene serves as a crucial function. It gives the villain, the illusion of depth. The best antagonists are the reflections of the hero, and the MCU tries, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, to make its villains more than just mustache twirling bad guys. Blackwood is a good instance of that not working. It was just a cutout character. Same thing a little bit with Whiplash and Iron Man 2. The problem is that these moments are often only real attempts at nuance before the third act devolves into a CGI brawl. The formula works because it tricks the audience to think they're watching something morally complex, when in reality, the villain will always be cartoonishly wrong. The hero will always be righteously victorious. And because the MCU doesn't do ambiguity, these scenes rarely linger, just long enough to suggest a depth before returning to the action. You have that in the first Wakanda movie where you have to say Killmonger was right and Black Panther was wrong. The illusion of high stakes. MacGuffins give the audience something to focus on while the characters go through the motions of the formula. They're a narrative shortcut, allowing the screenwriters to build stakes without actually having to develop them. Because the MCU is structured as an interconnected universe, these objects just don't matter for one movie. They're part of a larger mythology, ensuring that even the most minor trinket could turn out to be world-altering. Look at you, Pym particles. The formula works because it creates the illusion of weight, even when these objects are mostly just plot devices. You saw it with the Episode 9 of Star Wars. It was just sort of it was like the old serials. Okay, here's the thing. You go to the next area, get this next object, get the dagger, go to get the wayfinder, get this, where it's just a sequence of events, but nothing, no character development. After, the only thing better than a MacGuffin is the next MacGuffin waiting in the post-credits scene. The illusion of chaos before the precision of action. These scenes exist for two reasons. They make the heroes feel fallible, and they inject humor into the high-stakes finale. The MCU thrives on characters who seem like they're making up things as they go, even when their plan miraculously unfolds with the perfect choreography in the third act. The formula works because it creates the illusion that the outcome is uncertain, except it never really is. The good guys always figure it out. The audience never doubts them for too long, and by the time the plan is put into motion, it barely resembles the conversation that preceded it. The planning scene isn't really about the plan, it's about making sure the audience still is involved before the CGI takes over. Some TV series, they get to the point where the lead characters have an adventure and everything works out in the end. I'm going to talk about 24 a little bit later. The illusion of consequences without the cost. The fake-out death is the MCU's way of having emotional weight without committing to real consequences. It lets the characters have grand moments of sacrifice without the franchise losing valuable intellectual property. The formula works because it manipulates audience expectations. Marvel movies do kill characters, just not the ones that matter long-term. But with each fake-out, the impact of death in the MCU weakens. If nobody ever truly dies, why should the audience believe that the next time the character makes the ultimate sacrifice? Now, with all these, the key term is illusion. 24 is a good example. Once dead, always dead, except in the case of Tony Almeida. But they're good about, killing off some prominent people and leaving them dead. This letdown you see with entertainment is because there's a deviation from the broad common traditional morality, BCTM. Like I said, you see it with the girl bosses replacing the legacy white male deadbeat dads, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Indiana Jones. It's actively anti-male. In fact, you see this with Anthony Mackie, who's Falcon Captain America. He said, in the past 20 years, we've been living through the death of the American male. They have literally killed masculinity in our homes and our communities for one reason or another. Look at the acceptance rates in college. But I raised my boys to be young men. And however you feel about that, you feel about that. So he's allowing the open, okay, yeah, you may see things differently, but this is what we're doing, is we're killing off men. There's a series of books coming out of Canada to professors that are called Spreading Misandry, Legalizing Misandry, Faith in Misandry, Misandry. You have misogyny, which is hatred of woman, but a misanthrope is someone who hates mankind, so they coined this term misandry for male bashing. I follow the series. Recommend reading it. Legalizing Misandry is a really thick book. About some of these punitive child support things where the mothers don't give it to the kids, they keep it for themselves. Of course, there are deadbeat dads, and I don't deny that, but there are deadbeat moms, and if you can't admit that, let's agree to disagree. Gender and race swapping characters, female Silver Surfer coming up. You think about this too. This happened. Same thing happened with our community, with the 1820 musical. I guess they may have been following the Alexander Hamilton musical, which is all Latino cast. The only white person is King George III, and that's not so subtle racist messaging. The evil person is white. You're supposed to love your neighbor. But in the 1820 musical, they cast a black man as Hiram Smith. They cast a blonde woman as Emma Smith, even though she's a brunette, had very dark features. You see, if you've ever seen a picture of Joseph Smith III, he looks like Keanu Reeves because he got all of Emma's features. Joseph Smith has a little bit lighter complexion, blue eyes and light brown hair. You see the blonde Emma Smith. The thing that bothered me the most was the poster. And it has a poster of Emma using the Urim and Thummim. And one of the eyepieces, you can see sort of the Joseph Smith figure bent around. But it's interesting, in the poster, Emma was brunette. But in the play, she was cast, they had a blonde cast to play her. So it was like, okay, what's going on? Emma never used the Urim and Thummim. And you can read about that in section 25, where she's told to murmur not. But the whole thing is, this is just anti-reality, putting messaging ahead of reality. And that's where you get these entertainment conservatives. Social soapboxing. Twilight Zone did this, was very good about social soapboxing, but they did it within the context of the broad, common traditional morality. And so what's happened is there's been a shift working outside of this broad common traditional morality, but it's more of a radical individualism, radical egalitarianism, people just giving into impulse rather than following something that's ideal. I want this, so it's good, and you don't have any right to judge me. It's interesting, too, is Plato and Plato's Republic talk about a shift in music and politics, and I think he was onto something. You see the same thing with the shift in cultures. You did get a lot of social messaging, through the music, Elvis and the Beatles in particular, but also in the art form where Paddy Chayefsky and like Rod Serling was a good example, but movies like 12 Angry Men, Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, Babbitt's another one where you're criticizing it, but you're still working on this framework, and we've shifted outside of this framework, what C.S. Lewis calls the Tao, this common morality that we have, what we call the light of Christ, and that's where why things are getting really screwed up. And it goes deeper. So as you study the gospel and study the Book of Mormon, you're going to see what's wrong with the movies. The Book of Mormon contains the fullness of the gospel, and you study it, and you start approaching it a little bit differently, not as a missionary, not as a primary kid, but someone says, okay, look, I'm bothered by something. I need answers. I'm going to look to the Book of Mormon for my answers. You're going to find answers at what's wrong with entertainment, and also learn principles of proper finance too. Well, we're at 36 minutes, and that's news with the eyes of faith. Thank you.